Yo brolies, what's up? Today's video is a bit different. I want to give you a complete walkthrough of the camera app and all of its features for the Vivo X200. Now, this can be boring, but can also be very useful and informative for those who really want to get the Vivo X200. Now, this is not the X200 Pro just yet, but I'm pretty sure you're going to have a bit of an idea about all of the camera app features of the Vivo X200 series. I'm super excited about this, so let's get into it. Alright, so let's start with the walkthrough for the camera app and all of its features for the Vivo X200. This is actually an amazing phone for mobile photography with tons of features that you can take advantage of. So let's start with the Snapshot feature or Snapshot mode. I believe this one takes photos with faster shutter speed. So we have 1x, 2x, and 3x. So 23mm, 46mm, and 70mm. So let's try 1x first. And as you can tell, the shutter speed is 1/200 with a quite high ISO of 2888. So for comparison, just to give you an idea, let's quickly switch to photo mode or normal photo mode. Take a photo, and as you can tell, the shutter speed is significantly lower because we're indoor with low light. So 1/30, and the ISO is also significantly lower for around 444, which is quite significant difference. But if you want to take photos of faster moving objects or faster moving subjects, Snapshot is the way to go. Alright, so on the settings, here's what we have. So we have different aspect ratio, we have shutter speed, grid lines, level, shake reduction, watermark, and smart focus. The smart focus will automatically focus on subjects like people and pets. Okay, so of course we also have the HDR. Later we'll go through all of this more settings. But for now, let's move on to the landscape mode. So here we have different focal length, and as you can tell, it automatically detects that I'm using a tripod, which means it can take longer exposure and make the ISO lower. Okay, so we have 0.6, which is 15mm equivalent, 1, which is 23mm, 2, 46mm, 3, 70mm, and of course we have the 10x 233mm. But of course you can also extend that up to 20x or even more. Okay, so up to 100x. But for me personally, I'm going to limit myself up to 20x to get the best image quality. Alright, so let's start with 0.6 to give you guys a quick comparison about the different focal lengths and the image quality that you're going to get. Okay, so again, we have it detected that I'm using a tripod, so it's going to take a 12-second long exposure photo. Alright, so next we have 1x, 2x, 3x, and then 10x. And just to give you an idea, here's for 20x. Alright, so let's quickly go back to 1x. So here we have more settings. Of course, we have our aspect ratio and all that, but we do have 3 more settings here, or additional settings here. We have AR planet. This one you can use if you're going to do astrophotography. You can point it at the sky and see the stars. So yeah. And then we have miniature, which is pretty similar to a tilt shift lens or an effect similar to that, which makes or create a cartoon style miniature landscape photo. All right, and then we also have the art moon, which is kind of silly because you can take a photo of the moon and it will enlarge it and overlay it on a custom image that you can add here. All right, so that's pretty much all the 3 additional features here using the landscape mode. Okay, so aside from that, we also have different shooting scenario here for long exposure. So we have for water, for vehicles, fireworks, star trails, night graffiti, and mysterious for moving people. Okay, so you can also press on the icon here to give you more info about those different features here that you can explore or take advantage using this smartphone. So aside from that, we also have a bunch of filters here: atmosphere, soft, black and gold, cyberpunk, and green orange. And aside from those features, we also have landscape time-lapse here. We have stabilization here, and then of course our resolution, 1080p and 4K at 30 FPS. And in terms of other settings, we have grid lines, level, shake reduction, and watermark. Here you can also choose between different presets depending on your subject. So traffic, moving crowd, fast clouds, clouds, sunrise and sunset, slow clouds, ultra slow clouds, day to night, moving shadows, and passage of time. So you have a lot of presets here to make your life easier when shooting time lapses. And you also have auto if you want a really run and gun time lapse recording. And we also have Pro Auto if you want to adjust your settings manually. Alright, so that's about it for the landscape mode. Let's go ahead and move on to the portrait mode. We have a lot of settings and features here, so let's start. Up here we have the typical settings, and Smart Focus is now enabled with HDR as well. So right here we have our Zeiss bokeh. So we have natural, Biostar, B-Speed, sonar, planar, distagon, cineflare, and cinematic. Personally, my favorite is distagon. Okay, now this will only work if you have a foreground subject and your background, of course, is out of focus. Alright, so aside from that, we also have here your typical beautification settings like natural, classic, smooth, skin tone, and what have you. My favorite, of course, is natural. Then we have our different filters. So we have natural, textured, crisp, vintage, nautical, gray, black and white, French, soft, French soft, and panning. My personal favorite here is vintage, which is also my favorite when I was using the Vivo V40 5G. And then, of course, we also have our portrait lens kit here from 23mm up to 100mm. So it depends on your subject and your results that you want to achieve. Now, for this particular mode, I'm also going to take some sample shots from 23mm to 100mm, although we don't have any foreground subject here, just to give you guys an idea how it will look, okay? So 23, 35, 50, 85, and 100. So that's about it for our portrait mode. Now, let's move on to the photo mode. Now, we also have a bunch of features here. I'm telling you, this camera app and this smartphone is perfect for mobile photography and arguably the best smartphone for mobile photography. All right, so of course, we have our typical Google Lens. You all know about that already. Then we have our flash options here, live photo, and here we have three options in terms of the overall tone of your image. So we have vivid, textured, and of course natural. Let's go ahead and go to 46mm and take one pictures from each tone mode. Okay, so vivid, textured, and natural. Obviously the natural is a little bit more unsaturated compared to the vivid mode right here. Okay, so aside from that, we also have super macro mode, but we're going to tackle this part or this mode later because this is actually very interesting, very useful, and actually usable. All right, so compared to other macro lenses from other smartphones. All right, so we have 0.6 to times 10 again. So let's go ahead and take a picture of one of each focal length: 0.6, 23mm, 46mm, 70mm, and 233mm. Now going back to 1x just to give you guys an idea, we also have a bunch of filters here: grapefruit, night breeze, macarons, high contrast, and yogurt. So going back to no filter. And for more settings here, we have additional settings, which is effect adjustment, which I really like as well because you can adjust the sharpness. Brightness, contrast, and saturation is pretty much okay, but sharpness is a bit much in my opinion. So my preference here is around minus 50, but for the sake of this video, let's do a quick comparison. Let's go again to 2x so that you can have an idea or a better framing. Then let's go ahead and put it to minus 100 sharpening, and then minus 50 regular or standard or default 0, and then let's go all the way to 100 just to give you guys an idea. There you go. So let's put this back to the default. All right, so here are all the images side by side so that you can have an idea about the difference in terms of sharpness and various settings. Okay, by the way, under the photo mode, we have an arrow here that if you tap on that will enable the street photography mode. Now this is a more streamlined interface mimicking the typical DSLR or mirrorless cameras, but we do have all our bare essentials here like the white balance, aperture, shutter speed, exposure compensation, and of course our different focal length. Aside from that, we also have our tone here, textured, vivid, and Zeiss, natural. But we do have an additional option here, which is black and white. Okay, so here up top on the upper left corner, we have some settings, grid lines, and an option to keep the street photography camera mode as your default camera mode when you open the camera app. And then we also have cultural watermark, which is also a streamlined version of the watermark. We only have some details here without the EXIF and just the bare essentials. And then we have our shutter type just for some customization options for this particular interface. And then of course we have our Zeiss bokeh effects, and again my favorite here is this Tagon. Now we also have an option here to change our metering to spot or center, as you can tell, and we also have an option to turn on hyperfocal distance if you're into that. And last but not the least, and what's good about this is that like any mirrorless camera, we do have an option to save our settings, and we actually have two options here, or two profiles to save our settings. There you go, for different shooting scenarios and your preference. And I think that's about it for this street photography mode. And to go back, you simply press on the arrow here up top. Now let's go ahead and change to video. So here we have our flash, we have our stabilization that limits us to 2.8 resolution at 30 FPS. If we disable that, we go back to 4K and either 30 or 60 FPS. And then for more settings, we have different options here, including the brightness adjustment. And for the brightness adjustment, my go-to setting for that is -30, which I've already set here because default is a little bit overexposed, as you can tell with the highlights on the moss or the leaves. So I set that to -30. Okay, so let's do a quick video. Now moving on, starting from now, I'm going to turn on the fogger and pump for my paradarium so that we have some motions, because we're going to test some slow motion and other features for this camera app as well. Alright, so for the video, I'm just going to take a 10-second video so that you can have an idea how it looks. Alright, so let's move on to the portrait video. Now, I like this feature, but it has one deal breaker for me. But before that, let's go ahead and take a look at the available settings. So here we have the typical settings here, including the brightness adjustment that we can toggle here. And like I said, I want to put it at -30. And then we have bokeh effect from 2.0 to f16, which is basically off. So around 2.8 is the sweet spot or the default setting. And then we also have our beautification setting, because this is a portrait mode for video. And then we also have our styles or presets. So again, my favorite is natural. Now, like I said, there's one feature here that is quite a deal breaker to me, and that is the resolution. We're limited to 1080p and either 24 or 30 FPS. So it's kind of a bummer, because this is actually a good feature and it really looks good, but the resolution is again not 4K. But if you're going to upload to social media like Reels, Shorts, TikTok, I think 1080p is pretty substantial. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the portrait video, but let me just record 10-second video for this one. There you go. So let's move on to more settings right here. So we have high resolution, which basically take advantage of the full 50 megapixel camera of the Vivo X200. So we have ultra wide 0.6, we have 23mm 1x and 70mm 3x. Now aside from that, we also have panorama, ultra HD document for scanning documents, slow-mo, which we're going to test later, time-lapse, and of course the pro mode. This feature is actually one of my favorite as well, because you can fine-tune or manually adjust your settings, and you can also shoot super raw and raw. We also have here our tones, and we also have bracketing here, interval shooting, and Zeiss perspective correction if you don't want to manually correct it yourself after the fact. Now, you can adjust your exposure compensation, ISO, shutter speed, white balance, and of course your focus mode, or if you want to do manual focusing, and of course your metering. But the very important setting here for me is shutter speed. If you want to record videos with the 180-degree rule, you can use this or take advantage of this. Also, the exposure compensation is a good feature to be able to manually adjust as well. And of course, the ISO. If you want a cleaner look, you can also take advantage of that. And that's about it for all of the camera features, at least for the rear camera. For the selfie camera, let's talk about that later. But for now, let's go closer to my Polarium and shoot some slow-mo video and macro shots. Alright, so now we have the slow-mo mode, but unfortunately, we're limited to 1080p resolution, but at least you can shoot at either 120 or 240 FPS. Alright, so we have 1x and 2x here by default, but you can also zoom in all the way to 5x. But for now, or for this particular test, let's limit that to 2x. So we're gonna start with 120 FPS first, and I'll just put a side-by-side comparison for the 120 and 240 FPS. Alright, so next we're going to test the super macro mode, but for this particular test, I'm going to go handheld just to give you an idea how this awesome feature works, because it actually works in handheld, or you can actually take macro photos handheld because of the amazing autofocus system of this camera. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn that on, and as you can tell, we can go all the way to 10x, and this is actually the recommended focal length for the super macro mode, either the 10x or 20x, to get the full potential of this feature. So as you can tell, it automatically focuses or locking the focus to the subject, and if you move your phone, it's going to focus on that one. It's kind of hard to frame because sometimes it stops just to make sure that it's in focus. There you go. But once you trigger that, let's do it. There you go. It will result in a very sharp image. Yeah, granted, it has a sort of image parsing to make it more sharper than it actually is, but the result is actually pretty good, as you can see here. Now, we're also going to do a sharpness test for you guys, and actually did one earlier, so I'm just going to put all of them side by side here. Again, I put the sharpness down from 0 to 50 all the way to 100. So I'll just put all of those sample photos on the screen so that you can have an idea. But as you can tell, based from the preview here on the upper right corner, we're really far from the subject, but since we're shooting at 10x, which is around 233 millimeter, you can take a good photo of the subject right here. And let's do a quick shot again. And as you can see, the image parsing is really good. It makes the image sharper. And for my preference, again, minus 50 sharpness, just to make it more natural. So I think that's about it for the all the camera features here, at least for the rear camera. Now let's talk about the front-facing selfie camera. Alright, so in terms of the selfie camera, we do have at least two options or two modes available here, which is the portrait and photo mode. Under the portrait mode, here are all the available settings, including the HDR. And then we have the Zeiss bokeh effects, and again, my favorite here is the Distagon. And we're currently set at f2.8 for our aperture, which is actually the standard or default setting. And then we have beautification here. As you can tell, my imperfections are quite visible and apparent, but if you turn on the natural, it's more pleasing in the eye, and I look more handsome than without the filter, as you can tell here. We also have makeup, but we're not gonna touch that. Aside from that, under the beauty, we have a bunch of other features here that you can take advantage to enhance or make yourself more handsome or beautiful if you're into that. Okay, now aside from that, we also have our filters here: fresh, textured, garden, motion, fair, 1980s, pop art, mood, and stars if you're into that. And oh, we also have makeup here. And yeah, so that is for the portrait mode. Now going to the photo mode, it's more streamlined. So here are all the settings available, again including the HDR, and we do have different filters here. And as you can tell, the background is not out of focus, or we don't have the bokeh like what we have here under the portrait mode. So oh, we also have video mode. Before, I almost forgot. Alright, so we have our stabilization here, or steady phase, but it limits our resolution to 1080p 30 FPS. So disabling that gives us back the 4K resolution at 30 FPS and 60 FPS. And for other settings, here are all the available, including a one nifty feature here that I really like, which is the teleprompter. This feature will allow you to put custom text or custom script if you're into that, and you can also automatically scroll that, adjust the speed, and adjust the text size. For me, this is actually very useful for content creators, especially those who are doing TikToks, Reels, Shorts, and what have you. You don't necessarily have to use this to put all of your entire script, but you can also do bulleted list just to give you a sort of idea on your content. Okay, so aside from that, we also have brightness. You can also adjust the brightness here, and again, I set that to 30 or minus 30. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. But we also have portrait video here, which again limits our resolution to 1080p, much like the portrait video using the rear cameras. So yeah, 24 fps and 30 fps. Alright, so before we finish this video, let's talk about all the remaining settings here under the More Settings page. So we have watermark, and it is available for both photo and video with a bunch of options here. And then we have shutter sound, location, mirrored selfie, ultra-wide angle correction if you're into that, and quick action for camera if you press or double press the volume down button. And then you can also toggle the settings here that you want to keep when you close the camera app. So there you go. So we have a bunch of options here. And then we have smart recommendation, and this is the AI kicking in that will assist you on which particular settings or modes that is best for a particular scene or subject. And then we have portrait features. All right, so portrait framing, remove moles, and all that. And then we have shutter, so you can choose between touch, voice, and palm. So you can do gestures to wirelessly trigger the shutter. Okay, so we have default primary camera focal length, we have enhanced night sky, landscape moon effect, finish photo orientation prompt, photo glare reduction, street photography camera, QR code recognition, full focal length live photo, and of course the very important settings for video, which is resolution and frame rate for different various shooting modes like video, portrait video, pro video, slow-mo, and time-lapse. And we've already discussed that on each of the modes available on the camera app. Now you can also choose between H.264 or H.265 depending on your preference. I prefer H.264 for better compatibility and easy to edit, but you can also choose high efficiency H.265 to save some space. And aside from that, we also have a bitrate, and I already changed that to 32 Mbps. We have sound tracking, auto low light FPS, but this one I disabled because I don't want to shoot at 24 FPS because I'm usually shooting at 30 FPS. So we also have off-screen recording, black white balance, so that your white balance will not change between video, which is very important. And then of course your privacy statement and all that. And I think that's pretty much it. And I hope you get a thing or two. At least you're now familiar with all of the camera features and settings for the Vivo X200. You'll have to wait for my full review for more sample shots, especially for the portrait modes, because of course this one is not a person. So you'll have to wait for the full review to get more sample shots for the other modes, specifically those that requires a subject. Alright, so thank you very much for watching, guys. Huge thanks to Vivo for allowing me to experience the Vivo X200. I'll put some links below if you're interested. And please consider subscribing for the full review and other content that I'm possibly going to make for the Vivo X200. So thank you very much for watching, and see you on the next one. Have a great day, guys. You're awesome.